Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's episode-by-episode review of Season 6 of Better Call Saul. This video is part of a series of videos where I cover every season of Better Call Saul. In this video I cover Season 6 of Better Call Saul, so if you have not seen up to the very end of Season 6, thus up to the end of the show of Better Call Saul, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, it's been over a year, since I've done my last video for this series. So, I covered the first 5 series of Better Call Saul, each season. First 5 seasons, what am I, British? The first 5 seasons of Better Call Saul before Season 6 aired in my episode-by-episode reviews, where I did a video for each season. I went episode-by-episode in each season. This was before Season 6 aired, so that I could sort of prepare myself for Season 6. And I've done this season review thing with many shows before: BoJack Horseman, Babylon 5, all the Star Trek shows, and a few other various shows, Outer Limits, the Star Wars cartoons as well. So I've done this a lot, but Better Call Saul was the first time that I did it on the show that was still airing, and I did it in a way that before the last season had aired, so it was actually incomplete. And I did promise that about a year after Season 6 aired, because I wanted to give myself time to think about it, time for it to sit with me, time to distance myself from it so it wasn't so fresh. Because when Season 6 first aired, of course, I did cover each episode, as I did with all the seasons of Better Call Saul. I covered each episode as it aired. But the point of these season reviews is to do a retrospect sort of after the fact, so I wanted to give some sort of time for it to pass, so I wanted to wait about a year. And so it's about a year right now. Now, I gotta be honest, I actually forgot about it. I kind of forgot, I guess, like Daenerys. And, but one of my loyal Patreon supporters, Ricky, reminded me, is like, hey, aren't you ever gonna finish this Better Call Saul season reviews? And I'm like, yes, you're actually correct. I totally should do that. Now, also, I had been tallying up the episodes as I go, which I usually do, which usually accumulates in a countdown of my favorite, sometimes least favorite episodes, although some shows I don't do least favorite, like Breaking Bad and BoJack Horseman. This would be another show where I do not do least favorites, because there are no bad episodes, just mediocre ones. But I had been also promising to do a countdown of my favorite episodes of Better Call Saul, and again, I was waiting for Season 6 to finish. So that's another thing that I'm going to do, although that one I will do next month. This month, I want to finish my coverage with Season 6. I was thinking about perhaps splitting it into 2 separate videos, since the season was aired in 2 halves. I did the same thing with Breaking Bad, Season 5, although that I had a lot to say about, because the first part of Season 5 that I covered in the video was like over 2 hours long, and the second part I covered of Season 5, which was just the second half, it wasn't the entirety of Season 5, just the last 8 episodes in Season 5, was over 3 hours long, that video was. And so I'm going to try to not be as long with this season. Now, granted, it's 13 episodes, which was actually the normal length of a Breaking Bad season. All of Better Call Saul was shorter, with 10 episodes. However, this season was 13 episodes. Now, I bring up Season 5 of Breaking Bad because I was hoping, as Better Call Saul was airing, that it would be like Breaking Bad, because in my opinion, every season is better than the previous season. I think literally the show gets better each season. Like, I think Season 2 is better than Season 1, Season 3 is better than Season 2, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the final season, Season 5, which I think, and I still believe, is the best season of television or streaming or whatever to ever air ever. And so to hope that Better Call Saul would also end with a season like that, that's an extremely high bar. And the show meets it. It's kind of hard comparing Better Call Saul to Breaking Bad because they're different. They're two different shows. Better Call Saul is more character based, more drama based. Although there are some suspense and action things in it, I find that Breaking Bad is more tropey, but it's also really good in other ways. Where Better Call Saul is a bit more realistic, but then it's a bit more slow paced in other ways. So it's hard comparing the two. But I will say that season 6 of Better Call Saul, like Breaking Bad, is the best season of its show. I don't know if I would say season 6 of Better Call Saul is as good as season 5 of Breaking Bad, but it's definitely in the ballpark. Let me put it this way. If I were to do a top 5 favorite seasons of all time, this will definitely make my top 5. Season 6 of Better Call Saul. It was an absolutely amazing season and a great way to end the show. Now, I don't think Better Call Saul is exactly the same as what I think of Breaking Bad, whereas each season got better than the other, because I talked about this when I did my season reviews. I covered season 2 and 3, and I thought 2 was easily my least favorite. So that breaks that pattern right there, because I think 1's better than 2. And I also probably would say 1's better than 3 as well. Although there's some great moments in 3, it also does drag a bit. And I talked about how I felt like seasons 2 and 3 should have been combined into one season. If you need to make it 13 episodes rather than 10, then fine. But I think there was too much filler in both those seasons, and it could have been combined into one season. So that's my opinion there. But after we get through season 3 to season 4, it does do that phenomenon where each season is better than the rest. Season 4 is better than the first 3 seasons, and season 5 is better than season 4, and season 6 is better than season 5. It being the best season and ending on an ultimately awesome note. And also, when I did my countdown for Breaking Bad, season 5 episodes dominated my top 10, especially, my top 20. They dominated because there's so many 10 rated episodes in season 5 of Breaking Bad. It will be the same phenomenon here with Better Call Saul. Season 6 will dominate my Better Call Saul countdown because there's tons of 10 rated episodes, where previous seasons usually only had 1. I think there was a couple seasons that had 2 10 rated episodes, but yeah, this season had about 6. Yeah, so it is easily my favorite season of this show, and also one of my favorite seasons of all time. And so, yeah, an absolutely amazing season and great way to end the show. So let me go ahead and jump into the episodes. Starting with the first episode of Season 6, Wine and Roses. This continues off of the cliffhanger of Season 5. It's a pretty strong episode. It doesn't blow me away, but it really sets up for the season nicely. It's getting into this really nice dynamic in the Saul storyline with Saul and Kim sort of wanting to do this scam on Howard, which will be a major point in this entire season. And it's interesting because Saul is kind of against it, but he's like, oh, what's the harm in listening? So there's obviously a part of him that just loves the thrill of it and wants to go along with it. But to be clear, this is definitely Kim's baby. She's the one, and this was made clear in the season 5 finale when she did those guns and handguns, because she was totally the driving force. And I think she does have a bone to pick with Howard, more so than Saul does. I think she holds it more against him, and I think she wants the Sandpiper money for sure, so that she can do her pro bono work on with that funding. But I think that's not her main motivation. I think her main motivation is, well, partly, as she'll say later on, to have fun, but also to get back at Howard. Whereas with Saul, I don't think he's as impersonally invested. It's more of he can't resist a good scam. And especially since he loves Kim and sees that she's so into it that he just can't turn her down. And of course, once the thing gets started, he hits the sunken cost fallacy where he's completely invested. No way does he want to back out. Although and this is something they make clear in later episodes, is a lot more likely to back out than Kim is. Again, so they're making it clear that she is the one who's fully invested. And again, this is getting into a really and this is what makes the show so good, especially this final season, so goddamn good, because it focuses more on Saul and Kim's relationship, and it's very complex. It's a very give and take relationship. In some ways, Saul makes Kim worse. In some ways, Kim makes Saul better, and in some ways, Kim makes Saul worse, and in some ways, Saul makes Kim better. It's this very in and out, very give and take relationship. And in previous seasons, it was kind of like a dying. It was very reminiscent of a dying relationship with no chemistry until they started pulling the cons. And so this is what I think is ultimately Saul's biggest pull, is that he knows that Kim is more hot for him, which is always very evident, that she is more passionate, she's more lustful with him when they are doing these cons. And of course that is not the sign of a healthy relationship, but it is definitely the sign of a very complex and interesting one to examine. That's for damn sure. And so I think in this first episode we get, the Saul going to the country club and which is kind of funny because he's pretending that he's being discriminated against for being Jewish when he's not actually Jewish. He's just he changed his name to a name that's Jewish because he meets that one dude from the Mercer Verde guy who Kevin, I think his name is, who of course hates him and threatens to kick him out of the club as soon as he sees them, and he but he just wants to be there so he can plant some cocaine in Howard's locker. So that was kind of a suspenseful thing, and is sort of setting the stage for what they're going to do with Howard going forward. And then of course with the cartel storyline, we get the continuation of Nacho on the run for his life, trying to escape Salamanca territory, and being guided by Gus's men to this hotel. But when he tries to call Mike directly, Mike refuses to answer because Gus made it very clear to Mike that the Nacho is not going to survive. That is not their plan. And I do like that scene between Gus and Mike where Mike's like, Nacho deserves your respect, and he's like, oh, he hasn't. But, what's implied there is, yeah, I respect him, but he's still got to die. Which is very Gus-like, and so that was very powerful. And of course we get Lalo, that really creepy ass scene where Lalo goes to his doppelganger, gets him to shave the beard so he can kill him and plant his body there so people think he's dead. It goes along with how fucked up of a guy Lalo is. And then we see Lalo trying to go with the Coyotes to escape back to America, but then he, after talking to Hector, changes his mind and decides he needs to get proof, so he's going to go to Germany instead, and so backs out of going to the Coyotes and wants his money back. And of course the Coyotes, being assholes, don't want to give it back, so he just kills them all. And it's like, he says to all the other people in the truck who are ready to go, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to find some other way north. And at least he lets them live and gives them their money back. So I guess he's not totally a creep, but still, it's kind of interesting stuff there. So then we get into the next episode, which is Carrot and Stick. I think this episode is even stronger. I really like this episode. It's getting more into the nitty gritty with Nacho hiding in this hotel, and he's starting to realize that something's off. Of course, one of his big clues is the fact that Mike won't take his phone calls. I think that is a big head up, and then the fact that he figures out that someone's watching him, and that confrontation where he goes and he's like, I don't know, someone just gives him a phone. So then he calls, I can't remember his name, but Gus's contact, who's been in touch with them, and saying, oh, I'm going to leave. And then as soon as he hangs up, of course, that guy he's standing with who was watching him gets a phone call. So he knows that he's working for Gus. And then there's the big shootout when he tries to leave the hotel with the Salamanca. I always call them the cousins because they were Tuco's cousins, but the Salamanca twins, who are like Terminators or whatever, who kill one of their own men to stop them from killing Nacho because they want him alive. Again, shows how fucked up they were, because the whole point is to interrogate Nacho to find out what he knows. And of course, they're under the impression that Lalo is dead. I think it's only Hector who knows he's still alive. So of course that was super intense. But then you get the Kim and Saul storyline, which was also very strong, where we get the Kettlemans again. I did not expect them to bring back the Kettlemans. In fact, season 6 does bring back a lot of characters, and it keeps characters like Cliff and Rich, who when I was first watching this earlier season, I thought these would be one-off characters that we wouldn't really see going down the line, but they actually keep bringing them back. And of course, it's hilarious with the Kettlemans, and they using them to, Saul plays them like a fiddle, pretending he wants to be their lawyer, but really he knows that they're going to go behind him and go. And he even name drops Cliff, Maine, or what they're called, whatever in Maine. Law firm, because he knows that it's sort of to trick them into going to him, which is exactly what they do. And Cliff Maine absolutely won't take the case, but again, it raises his suspicion about Howard being a drug addict. And then the Kettlemans realized they were played, and they threatened. And you had that nice scene with him and with Saul and Kim, where like, oh, let's do the carrot. They're carrot people. They'll take the carrot. And Kim's like, no, I think you're gonna have to use the stick. And then so Saul tries to pay him off, but then, of course they're like threatening him or whatever. And then Kim does this totally badass thing by calling like their friends, saying, oh, this investigations, and saying she's buddy with them, and saying, oh yeah, these people are running this tax fraud, and we're gonna get to investigate her, and it would completely destroy their lives. And Kim just like hard face, like flat out, it's like, if you say one word, I will destroy you, and just leaves them completely like terrified and just chilled. And then when Saul comes back, Kim's like, you gave him the money, didn't you? So that was really powerful. That was really good. So this was a really strong episode. So then we get into the next episode, which is Rock and Hard Place, and goddamn, what an amazing episode. Guys, I remember in my review, I just was so shocked that Nacho died. I was just like, oh no! And for some reason, when I did my review for this, it got over 2,000 views, which I hadn't gotten a video that gotten that many views in years. So that was interesting. But anyway, this episode was so goddamn good. Following mainly, for the cartel storyline, It is interesting. We do get we deal more with the blowback with Saul in the next episode, but we do get that lawyer going to Kim, trying to convince Saul to give up Lalo. But I like when she tells him about it, he's like, "Do you think I should do it?" And Kim's like, "Well, do you want to be a friend of a cartel or do you want to be a rat?" Sort of saying like you're putting your life in danger. And it's interesting she gives that advice, but that's, at the moment, that's clearly that's not their main concern. Their main concern is still, running the scam on Howard, which, they have this, this is the episode where they use Huel to, make a copy of, was it the valet scam, where they make the copy of Howard's keys so that Saul will be able to use it later. But anyway, of course, what really makes this episode great is the cartel storyline, particularly with Nacho, where we see him hiding in this old abandoned oil tanker and just doing hiding in the oil, whatever, and it's just really disgusting things in order to stay alive. But then he realizes what the deal is, and that he realizes what Gus's position is, but he realizes that there's no scenario in which he survives. And so he wants to bargain to save his father's life. And of course, we had this big cliffhanger in the previous episode I forgot to mention, which also made that episode really great, with Mike absolutely refusing to let Gus kill Nacho's father, and that Gus's thug even pulls a gun on Mike, who just does not flinch and is still flat out, no, that's not going to happen. So intense, and then you get the resolution of that in this episode, where Nacho actually calls, and that sort of is a way to diffuse things. It is interesting how Gus kind of forgets this moment ever happened, that Mike openly defied him and that he threatened to kill him, and they kind of move past this episode. But anyway, and then Nacho doesn't talks to Gus and is and tells him, you're screwed, if they find me, they're gonna torture me and make me talk, and the only way for you to get out of this is to for you to find me first, but he bargains for them not to hurt his father, but he doesn't believe it from Gus, he'll believe it from Mike. And he even asks Mike, "Why should I believe you?" And Mike just flat out says, anyone who tries to kill your father has to go through me first. And that's a nice, lovely sentiment, but Mike is not going to devote 24 hours a day protecting his father, so it's not incredibly accurate. But at least it shows that he absolutely would not stand for Gus doing it, which was, as we see, was very clear. So, but at this stage, it benefits Gus more by not harming Nacho's father, because he would get Nacho to cooperate. And so they pick him up. And before they pick him up, you have that scene where he goes to the gas station and he uses the phone to call his father. God damn it. That was such a powerful scene. It just shows how amazing the actor who plays Nacho is. I talked about this before in previous seasons, but this is an Oscar-worthy performance, and it really brings you to tears, because it's his last conversation he's ever going to have with his father. He knows it, but his father doesn't know it, and his father just is, doing the normal stuff, just turn yourself in, what else is there to say? But he's just I'm just so happy to hear your voice. It was so touching, and it was so heartbreaking. And then you get the scenes when Mike is sort of, he has to beat the shit out of him in order for it to look real, because Nacho has to look like he's been tortured. And, the Victor, was it Victor? One of those guys was like, "Oh, you want me to do it?" And Mike is like, "Get the fuck out of here, I'll handle it." And he brings out this really nice scotch and drinks it with Nacho's before I beat the shit out of you, let's this, and it's just so powerful. And then of course the actual scene when Nacho is confronted with the Salamancas and Juan Bolsa, and he spins the tale that it was the gang from Peru that was responsible for it, not Gus. He sells it so well, saying, "What, you think it's the chicken, Mad?" Whatever. He actually, and then he talked, and he actually revealed that he was the one that poisoned Hector and caused him to be in the wheelchair. And he's like, "Oh my God, that was so powerful." He's like, you all disgust me. Every moment I spent with you was, I was totally disgusted by you, and you all deserve to die. And he's like, "I'm the one that put you in the chair. Whenever you're sipping your thing through a straw, you think of me." And God fucking damn it. Such a powerful scene. And then he pulls the gun on Juan Bolsa, but really it's just a way for him to get to kill himself. So he, uses the gun to kill himself because he realizes that's the only way out. Now, the one thing that I was kind of nitpicking, though, is he really overdid it to, like, really enrage and anger the Salamancas, and I think that's risking the Salamancas going to kill his father just out of spite. Just out of the fact that, because they can't kill Nacho because he killed himself, and if it seems like that's risking them taking their frustrations out on his father, and as I said, Mike can't be there 24 hours a day to protect his father, but of course that's not what happened, but I feel like that would be the risky part in overdoing it the way he overdid it. But goddamn, that was so powerful. Now, I remember when I first saw this episode, I was in disbelief because I didn't think Nacho could die, because we had the scene, the dialogue from Breaking Bad where Saul says it wasn't me, it was Ignacio. But it wasn't until later in the show when they had to reveal why Saul said this that, I realized that he doesn't have to be alive currently for him to say that. Like, I don't even know if he knew Nacho was dead. That was maybe he did and I just missed that. Maybe someone will point that out. He thought that Lalo might still be alive at this stage. That's why I was like, did Lalo send you? So that makes sense. But, he even said that to Lalo first when Lalo, kidnapped him, saying it wasn't me, it was Ignacio, which is, because Lalo hinted that he thought Saul was involved in the attack on his compound, so we see that's what he was referring to. So, finally, people were theorizing for like 8 years on what that line was going to be. It wasn't me, it was Ignacio, but that it was referring to that attack on Lalo's compound at the end of season 5. And even at the end of season 5, I didn't realize that's what it would be. But yeah, apparently. Anyway, as I said, absolutely amazing episode. So next episode is Hit and Run. Not quite as good. We're kind of back to focusing more on the Howard scam of it all. And we get Wendy again from Breaking Bad. She always makes an appearance, where they use her to, where Saul, impersonates Howard, steals his car, and when Cliff is having a meeting with Kim, does throws Wendy out of the car, and she yells at him, and sort of more implying again that he's just insinuations that, he's on drugs, and so yeah, so that made things a bit interesting, and yeah, it's and we see that started where we see that couple in a nice house who were like just complaining about other houses and shit, and they were like seem very irrelevant, but then they actually find that they're living in a decoy house that Gus is hiding in. They're very nonchalant about it, which is interesting. And we see the measures that Gus is taking because he knows Lalo's still out there, because he realizes Lalo's still alive when he visits Hector, and Hector smiles and he's like, oh fuck, something's off. and so yeah, he goes through all these measures to sort of hide and whatnot, which was kind of interesting. But what I really like about this episode is the Mike's men following Kim, and she spots them, and Wendy points them out, thinking it was the cops, but she knows that they're following her afterwards, and she freaks out and encounters them, and then we get Mike confronting her about it and saying and sort of explaining that Lalo's still alive. And goddamn, that was such a good scene. Finally getting these two together interacting. It was such a powerful scene. I love when Kim, asks him, like, why are you coming to me and not my husband? And he's like, because you're made of sterner stuff. Which is true. Which is true. She absolutely is, and she knows that Saul would freak out if she told him, and which is exactly why she doesn't tell him. Which is, again, really interesting stuff. And yeah, that on the strength of that alone, I think that makes this episode pretty damn good. So the next episode is Black and Blue. This episode's okay. It's kind of a necessity, but again, sort of more slow paced. It's sort of deals with Howard figuring out that Saul and Kim are trying to scam him. But of course, as we find out later on, that's part of their scam. They wanted him to find out. And it's funny because when Howard confronts him, he's like, you want to get caught. Like, you were so sloppy. It was so obvious it was you. It's just a part of you subconsciously wants to be caught. And I remember thinking to myself, like, when I watched that scene, it's like, that doesn't sound right. I don't think that's true. And it's not. It's not that he subconsciously wanted to get caught. It's that it was part of their scam for him to figure out that they're scamming him. And you see him with this PI that he's sending to, investigate Saul and find out what he's doing. But we later learned that's a fake PI that was implanted by Saul. God damn, that was a really strong twist. And you learn more about Howard. We saw in the previous episode that he was was seeing a psychologist. He was in therapy. So he's not this perfect playboy living a perfect life. He has issues. I don't even know if they even mentioned he had a wife in previous seasons. If they did, I certainly didn't notice it. And here we finally get to meet her in this episode, and again, how their relationship is dying. She obviously doesn't really love him and is only with him for political or financial reasons, and makes him sleep in the guest house, and he tries to, just a small thing where he tries to make her this really elaborate latte when she just throws it into a cup, not giving a shit. It's the subtle things that Better Call Saul always hints at the larger issue, which is that their marriage is pretty much falling apart, and how his life is kind of shit right now. And he even points that out. He's like, oh, you just doing this because you think Howard has everything, but I don't actually really. And of course that, boxing, the boxing thing where he, beats up Saul, and Saul later is like, how did I let him goad him into this? And Kim is like, well, the reason why he did is because you know what's going to come next. And basically saying, it's not going to be good for him. And you're feeling kind of guilty about that. Again, so it's making it clear that they wanted him to find out, that that's all a part of the plan to find out. And then we get second half of the episode deals with Lalo in Germany. We hadn't seen Lalo since episode 1. We find out what he's been up to, and he's going to Werner's widow, trying to get information. And that was really actually intense, because I was like scared the whole time that he was going to kill her, but he actually doesn't. But because he gets the information he needs, he gets a name of someone from his crew, so he can go interrogate them, which he does in the next episode. not a bad episode at all. Pretty, definitely continues the story. Definitely very interesting, but doesn't really stand out as being amazing. But definitely necessary. So then we come to the next episode, Axe and Grind. So this is mainly just a setup episode. Again, not a bad episode. But as nothing really significant happens, and is more of setting it the stage. It's kind of getting us prepared for the big mid-season finale. That's the next episode. So it's interesting because it starts with a flashback to Kim as a kid. And the kind of terrible mother that she had, which is interesting because we got a lot of Jimmy flashbacks throughout the years, but never really a Kim one. So it was interesting. Oh, we got one with her mother before, but this was a bit more interesting where she's encouraging her to shoplift or whatever. And it really, again, it really speaks to sort of Kim's psychology here, and how she's really the one pushing for this scam. And of course we get that comes to a head when she meets with Cliff, who offers her this deal where there's a big organization, this charity that helps, that does the exact same work that she does. It helps lawyers or people who can't afford good defenses to get good lawyers, and it's exactly down her alley. And they're coming to Albuquerque, and Cliff offers her meeting with them so she could pitch it and expand the kind of charity work that she's doing and do a lot of good for the world. So it's right up her alley. Now, at first, she's worried about it because the meeting is on the same day, that they call D-Day, the day that they plan on running the scam on Howard. But Jimmy, or Saul, very rightfully says, don't worry about the scam. You go do your thing. I'll do the scam. I'll run it. Everything's going to be, pitch perfect, fine, and don't worry about it. But then we get that really twist ending where Saul just happens to be in a liquor store buying that same kind of tequila, that the really, really expensive one that they did there. Him and Kim ran their first scam together with that stockbroker guy, and it's definitely has very significant value to them. But while he's buying that, and of course that's meant to be to celebrate their successful scam, but of course he just happens to run into that judge who they were faking in the photos, and finds that he has a cast, which the fake photos that they took with the actor pretending to be the judge very clearly is not wearing the cast, so that if they try to go with the scam, Howard will spot it immediately that something's off. So Saul very rightfully freaks out and calls Kim, and it says, okay, we'll just call this off, we'll regroup, we'll figure something else out, but it's a good thing, or at least we found this out, that this just simply isn't going to work. And this is when the moment of truth really happens for Kim, because she can decide to go to this meeting that's more important. So basically this is where it comes to where she has to choose what is more important to her. For a while she wants her cake and eat it too. She wants to do this charity work, but she also wants to have fun running the scam against Howard. And in fact, one was meant to justify the other. The scam on Howard is meant to give them the sandpiper money sooner, so that she can use that money to do her pro bono charity work. However, here, that facade, that excuse is kind of taken away from her, because here she could run that charity work better without the damn sandpiper money. If she does, gets this organization to back her, that's all she really needs. So it's really put to her in simple terms. What's more important? Either the charity work or running the scam, and she chooses the scam. She literally makes a U-turn on the highway and says, no, nothing stops, we're not calling this off. Goes back to Albuquerque so she can help Saul runs the scam. So she makes the decision to that the charity work, because again, this is when that excuse in her head falls apart, that, oh, I'm doing this to help my clients. Bullshit. She's doing this because she has fun doing it. She's doing it to get back at Howard, and the facade is dropped when she makes that decision. And then that was actually that was a very powerful moment. But also in this episode, we get, they do more stuff like bleeding into Breaking Bad, such as having Saul get Francesca to pretend to be someone else. And she's like really against it. She hates it. She says never again. Calling someone on the phone, pretending to be someone else, making a fake phone call. And she's like, oh, you're never going to make me do this again. Of course, we know in Breaking Bad, she does it all the time. And it was sort of that prequel setting it up. We also see Lalo going to the worker who worked with Werner, and they had this intense confrontation where you think that he, injures Lalo, but Lalo ends up getting the better of him. And it's never stated explicitly whether or not Lalo killed this guy, but of course he did. Lalo's cold-blooded. Why wouldn't he kill him? But he got the information that he needed about where the construction site they were working on for Gus Fring, so he now has what he needs to get back at Gus Fring. We also get some scenes with Mike. It's kind of a touching scene with Mike and his, granddaughter talking on the phone, and how he thinks it's more important to protect them than it is his own house, even though, the possibility of Lalo going after them is 1 in a million, but still, that's what's important. So that was kind of a nice scene. But yeah, overall, this episode was mainly just setting up for the next one. So let's get to the next one. The next big episode, Plan and Shoot. And as I mentioned before, this was the mid-season finale. Now, I want to talk about later where I actually don't think this should have been the mid-season finale. Like, granted, it ends on a very mighty, hefty cliffhanger, and I remember having to wait months for it. It was very agonizing, and so it was definitely a good hook. But story-wise, I actually think the mid-season break should have been later, but I'll get to that later. I think this is more the gimmicky break to have it on a big shocking cliffhanger, because this episode and the next episode do sort of form a two-parter. This is sort of the first half of the story, where we see Lalo, return to Albuquerque and is, scouting Gus's place, trying to figure out how best to expose him. And on the Jimmy and Kim side, we see them trying to readjust. They have to go back and get all the people. They need to take the pictures again because the pictures they took were no good. They had to go to the actor who's working at a Walmart type place. They had to go to the asshole media studies students, the film students, and who's being a dick to all the other students, and convince them to go. And we see them, this is a typical thing Better Call Saul does, where we see them setting everything up and taking the pictures, and now they have the guy in the cast. And I like that they still hadn't completely explained what exactly the scam is. But of course, and that's what makes it more satisfying when we get the scene where it actually does. We see Howard's PI bring him the photos, the fake photos that Jimmy said, and of course they put this weird stuff on the photos. Now, we saw from the previous episode, it was a weird, like, highly caffeinated thing that makes your pupils really dilated. It makes you look like you're on drugs, and that was the only point of it. And then Howard falls for it, and we get to see the plan unfold. how he now thinks that Jimmy paid off the judge, and so he accuses the judge of. And really, this is the scam. Howard is the scam, and this is the part of it I wasn't completely sure of. That, as I said earlier, they wanted Howard to suspect them of scamming him. They wanted him to hire PI, which apparently they had in advance had his office switch the number for their investigators, so he would call a fake investigator that Saul would hire to trick him, and send them, give him the photos that are laced with the drug, and then take those photos away and swap them from different photos, so when he goes to show everyone else, the proof is actually something totally different. Although, what would they have done if Howard actually took those photos with him rather than leaving him in his office? That's kind of a convenient thing for them. But anyway, but yeah, the scene where Howard goes off on the judge is very similar to the chicanery where Chuck flips out, and that Kim and Jimmy sort of were playing him and planning for them and to flip out and make fools of themselves. So they pretty much did the same thing. And where Howard is, totally flipping out, and Rich, who's of course the opposing attorney, is goes to Cliff afterwards. It's like, we're going back to our original offer, and that lasts till the end of the day, and the next day it goes down by $1 million, a day after that another $1 million. So basically, that's kind of convenient though, but it basically is the exact result that Saul is looking for, that they have to settle immediately, and rather than dragging it out for a really long time, which is, as I said, typical of court cases like this. But they realize that Howard just tanked them, and that they have to take the plea immediately. And of course, Howard is pissed off with Cliff, who says this and saying, I won't settle for this. I won't let Jimmy win. And Cliff is like, I don't care about you. It's not about you. It's not about Jimmy. It's about our clients, and about the expenses. And this is what's best for them. So yeah, and the very interesting thing is seeing Kim and Saul listen into this. They have they're listening to this happening on their phone, and the really interesting, they're giggling and smiling as it's going down. But the really interesting thing is, by the time Cliff comes back and announces that they're taking the deal, Saul and Kim are already making out. They're already getting ready to have sex, which again plays into what Howard says later in this episode is 100% spot on. They get off on it. And in fact, this was shown throughout the show that Kim gets off on it. She gets more passionate, more lustful with Saul whenever they run these scams. And when they're not running scams and living mundane lives, she kind of gets bored with him, and their relationship starts to fall apart. And again, so this is why this is such a very interesting dynamic relationship. Honestly, there's a lot of great aspects to the show. There's the cartel storyline is very fascinating. Mike's backstory, how he gets to join up with Gus. Of course, the Chuck's downfall and how that affects Jimmy, and his being jealous of Chuck and wanting to be like him, and being devastated when he found out Chuck, didn't believe in him. These are all very powerful through storylines in the show that if anyone latches on to any of those storylines, I don't fault them at all. They're definitely very powerful and executed very well. But for me, it is the storyline with Kim and Saul that is, for me, is the biggest is the biggest through storyline, because it's just such a complex, dynamic, sort of codependent relationship. Is definitely not a healthy one, but it's a very interesting one. Anyway, so that's explored more when Howard goes to confront Saul and Kim, which is one of the best scenes in the entire show. Again, this is kind of the sort of Oscar-winning scene when Howard is berating them, and he's actually 100% correct in everything he says, and it goes to show how smart Howard is and how he can see through them. And particularly, as I just said, the one line that I love the most is when Howard is like, "Oh, I get it. You two get off on it." It's so clear, and he's right. He's 100% right. And of course, they're not wanting to give in, and they're just like, "Oh, you've drunk too much. You need to go home." Blah blah blah. That's enough. And it is interesting that because when he goes to Saul, he says like, you can't help it. You're just like this way. Chuck saw it. He knew that you're just this way. But you, Kim, I don't understand. You had a beautiful, career. You're smart. And why are you throwing it all away for this? And of course, and then after that, that's when he realizes she gets off on it, and that's why she's doing it. Which is absolutely correct. And goddamn, was that powerful. But of course, it didn't end there. It ends with Lalo showing up and shooting Howard in the head, which is one of the most shocking moments. And again, I get the intention of making this the mid-season finale, because that was a hell of a way that was a fucking shocking cliffhanger. That was a hell of a way to end the season. But yeah, and as earlier in the episode, it was obvious that it was interesting because Lalo tried to call Hector, but then heard the clicks, and he realized that Gus was listening, and he was like, fuck, because he realized that Gus is going to be aware that he's there now, and he's not going to fool him. So that's why he called Hector again and told Hector, "Oh, I'm going to kill Gus," even though that's not his intention, but he knows Gus is listening, which is very fascinating. But then he tries to come up with a plan of how he's going to misdirect Gus further so he can go to the laundry and uncover the hidden laboratory. And then he sees a cockroach, and earlier in the previous season, he referred to Saul as a cockroach, and that gave him the idea to use Saul and Kim. And yeah, and so Howard was just, as Saul says later on, in the wrong place at the wrong time. He just so happened to be at the wrong place, and because of that, he died. And God, it was just so powerful. But then there's so that leads to the next episode, Point and Shoot, which is the follow-up. And again, Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad always has these very visual, artistic scenes that they open the teaser that they open the episode with, that seemingly doesn't really have anything to do with anything, but by the end of the episode it will make sense. This, I think, was the most powerful one that both shows ever did, where it shows a car by the ocean with the door open, the music playing, you see some shoes floating in the in the water, and then you scan back and you see it has the New Mexico license plates. And I think you can even recognize it as Howard's vanity plates. Was it say Namaste? That's right. And so it's Howard's car. But still, and I think that was a very chilling way to begin the episode, because later, at the very end of the episode, of course, Mike explains that they are going to plant the car there, and you even see Mike take Howard's shoes off, and they're going to fake his death as a suicide. So anyway, but this is a very intense episode, probably one of the, if not the most intense episode of the entire show, and like the scene in particular where Lalo is, telling Saul that he's going to go to Gus Fring's house and shoot him, just point and shoot, and then take the camera and point and shoot. But then Saul, of course, convinces Lalo to have Kim do it. And again, the acting is just so amazing, so good when Kim is just freaking out the whole time. Saul's trying to convince Lalo to have Kim do it. She's just saying, no, stop, no. But, and at first, when I first saw this, I was thinking, wow, he's an asshole. He's turning on her, making her do the dirty work because he's too cowardly to do it. But I think it's made clear, and I think it's definitely made clear to Kim by the end of the scene, especially when Saul says, just go, get out of here, go, that he's actually doing it to save her. Because he doesn't want her to be the one alone with Lalo, where he's fears for her life, and she's the one that he's going to kill if everything doesn't go his way. So he's doing it to get her out of there, so he would be the one at stake. So he's actually sacrificing himself, which is something I think she realizes and appreciates. And yeah, just the whole scene with the car ride over when she's sitting at the traffic light with the cop car pulls up next to her, like everything is just, this is just suspense 101. It was just so intense the whole time. And then when she gets there, of course, Mike and his guys are ready, and they take her down before she gets anywhere near Gus. But that's kind of the point. Like, Lalo, of course, knew that. He didn't actually think Kim would be successful. It was just a misdirect. It was a way to get them to go in the wrong direction, because now Kim's telling them that Lalo is at Saul's apartment, so of course they're all going to go running to Saul's apartment. Now, I heard the opinion that Mike was kind of being dumb by not seeing through this scam and realizing that it was misdirection, that obviously Lalo wouldn't be there. But I disagree. I mean, I don't think there's anything really. I mean, I suppose you could say Lalo wouldn't be dumb enough to think that Kim would actually kill Gus, but still, it's like the biggest lead, and you have Kim freaking out saying that, they're going to kill Jimmy. And I think it makes total sense for... I mean, they already kind of fall for Lalo's bullshit when they pulled Ben off the laundry just for when Lalo told Hector they was going to kill Gus. So I didn't think this was particularly dumb. But then you had Gus, talking to Kim. I actually thought that Gus was the dumb one, actually, to be honest, because, and the other person, some other people were saying that Gus was the smart one. I actually think he was the dumb one because, all right, hear me out, because he talked to Kim and figured out that this was a distraction, right? Because when Kim said that Jimmy talked him into letting Kim go, and he was like, wait a second, if he really cared about this plan, he wouldn't let himself be talked into changing it. So it's obviously not important. But this is why Gus is dumb, because he's smart for figuring that out, sure, but he's dumb because he decides to go to the laundry without calling Mike, without letting him know, without saying, hey, pull all your men to the laundry, that's his real destination. Now, granted, at this stage it was just a suspicion, but by having that suspicion, instead of going and investigating it himself and giving Lalo the biggest target, which is him, he should have called Mike. And that was actually really stupid of him to go there himself. In fact, Mike even points that out. It's like, well, next time you want to go play detective, call me first, which is exactly what he should have done. So no, Mike wasn't the dumb one here. It was Gus. But either way, I buy it. Either way, I think it was really intense. And then, of course, Lalo gets a hold of Gus. And, that whole, making the videotape for Don Hilario. And goddamn, that was so, and it was very similar to the way Nacho told off the Salamancas right before he died, that Gus was telling off the Salamancas and the whole cartel exactly how much he hated them. But of course they would never see that tape because that would interfere with what happens in Breaking Bad, because Gus eventually does get the better of Lalo by tripping the lights and killing him, which goddamn, was that scene ever so intense. It's so funny that you're sort of rooting for Gus, even though he is an evil man. and yeah, and then we get I think the amazing scene where Kim and Saul are reunited, and they're hugging, and then Mike sort of explains, does his sort of cleaner thing where he explains everything that's going down, and that what they're going to do, and that him and his men are going to completely clean up the place. And they're going to, run with the story that Saul and Kim were setting up, that Howard was a drug addict and that he went and ran and committed suicide, and that explains his death. One of the lines that Mike says to them here that really, really stuck with me is when he says, this is, it's, you're not going to look into space. You're not going to look into space. You're not going to look upset. This is just another day that ends in Y. I actually thought that maybe the next episode should have been called that, Another Day That Ends in Y. Or at the very least, a montage that in the next episode that shows them back at work. I think that montage should have been called Another Day That Ends in Y. I don't know. I know that's a popular saying. That's not something originated here, but it's just that really sort of, I don't know, for some reason that really stuck with me. So yeah, this is an amazing episode. Another one. As I said, season 6 has a lot of them. So let's get into another amazing episode. The next episode, Fun and Games. Now, this is the episode I think that should have been the mid-season finale. Now, hear me out. Because, and I think you can tell where I'm going with this. Because this is episode 9 of a 13-episode season. So it makes more sense if you're going to go halvesies that you do episode 7 and then air the next 6 episodes instead of going 9 episodes and then airing 4 episodes. It's very unbalanced. However, Discovery actually did that, and I think its first season they aired 9 episodes and then aired 4 more because it sort of made a clean break with their Mirror Universe arc they were doing, and so it made more sense for the story even though it wasn't split down the middle. And I think that's the same thing here, because this actually feels like a finale of sorts, because this is the end of the prequel storyline, which is the main storyline we've been following for all 6 seasons. After this episode, they jump forward to post Breaking Bad, and we do get a couple intermixed with a couple of flashbacks that take place during Breaking Bad times. But they basically, they skip over this this storyline is ended, and they move into the Gene stuff. And the Gene stuff, we've only gotten like a couple scenes at the start of each season, except for this film. But the first 5 seasons, it was just a scene at the very beginning of the season. And so we didn't have as much connection to the Gene stuff as we do with this prequel storyline. That was showing what happened before Breaking Bad, that featured Kim and Howard and Chuck and all them. And this is the end of it. This is where that storyline ends. So I think, even though it definitely wouldn't have been as big of a cliffhanger, for sure, it wouldn't have been that draw to draw people back to see what happens next, it would have been a more logical break in this season. I think I do see this as a finale of sorts, that it sort of stops there. But anyway, enough of that. Let me get into this episode, which I fucking love. This episode, I think this episode is absolutely amazing. That shows the aftermath of what happened and how it's affecting Kim. And as I said, the montage at the start of this episode, which I call Another Day That Ends in Y, was fucking beautiful. It was just one of the best montages the show has ever done. The contrasts, Jimmy and Kim trying to go about their day and having a normal day, trying to pretend that's nothing wrong. They intercut that with scenes of Mike cleaning up Saul's apartment, the dead body in the refrigerator, and you even have some interesting transitions with Mike wiping blood down, which transitions into Saul wiping ketchup on a plate. Is the kind of thing that they do, and it's just really sells just. And the music, of course, is this nice, beautiful music about it's a perfect day, which is, showing the trauma that they're hiding, which is mainly what this episode is about like this trauma that they're absolutely hiding. And then when they get home, they drop the pretenses of this being a perfect day, and they're both back to being sort of terrified. But they get home and everything's back to normal. Their apartment's normal. And then when they go to bed, Kim is definitely looking into space, the one thing that Mike told her not to do when she was out in public, but she's not in public now, so she's able to do it. And he tells her, one day we're going to just look in the mirror and we're going to realize that we hadn't thought about this for a long time. And so that's when we're going to know that we can forget this. Which is kind of, in retrospect, especially once you've seen the whole season, is kind of a ironic statement, because we find that that's not actually true for Kim. It's true for him. It's definitely true for Saul. He forgets all about it. He goes on, does even worse stuff after this. But for Kim, she's still thinking about it. It's still haunting her 6 years later. So what he says to her is bullshit, and she knows it. And you can tell just by her reaction. It's fucking beautiful. So then we see Mike and Gus for the last time, which is, I think if you hadn't seen Breaking Bad this season, particularly the transition between this episode and the next episode, fails you. Like, for the most part, this show you could watch independently without seeing Breaking Bad, but I think you'd be missing a lot in this season, particularly these last episodes, if you hadn't, because Gus and Mike's storyline just kind of, doesn't even end. It just peters out. It just stops. Because you have to see Breaking Bad to know what happens to them, because they both die in Breaking Bad, and their conclusion, Gus is, wanting revenge on the cartel, is resolved in Breaking Bad. So most people who had seen Breaking Bad saw before this moment. But anyway, it's still a very interesting way to leave their storyline, because we see Gus meet with Don Olario and the cartel, and the cartel, Hector tries to convince them that he killed Lalo, but the cartel doesn't listen because they're making a lot of money off of Gus and want to continue to do so. However, it's very interesting that, because Hector says to Don Olario, it's like, look in his eyes and all you see is hate. And at the end, after Don Olario tells Gus that everything is going to stay the same and they're going to continue making money, he says, when I do look in your eyes, I do see hate, but a little's okay, but know who you're working for. Which, if you've seen Breaking Bad, you know is kind of ironic, because Gus does kill Don Olario, so he's being kind of naive here by thinking that Gus couldn't get the better of him, which he does eventually. And so we have this scene with Gus going to the wine bar and flirting with that guy, which at first I thought kind of dragged on. I do think maybe it does drag on a little bit too long, and I thought it was totally unnecessary, but I get the meaning of it, that it's because at the end he ultimately doesn't go with the guy. He's like, he gets this cold, distant look because he realizes that he still has a lot of shit to do and anger at the cartel, so he leaves. So it's showing how he's letting revenge get the better of him. So that's how he ends out Better Call Saul, showing that he will let revenge get the better of him, and that if you've seen Breaking Bad, you know that will be his downfall. So it is kind of the perfect way to end it out. Now, we do see Mike in a couple flashbacks, or one flashback. Yeah, a couple flashbacks in the next couple episodes, but this ends his continuous storyline that we've been following this season, where he sort of, you know, goes to Nacho's father, which is kind of, again, the perfect way to end out his storyline. He lets his father know that Nacho's dead, and he, says, "Don't worry, we're gonna get revenge on the guys who did it." And Nacho's father's just like, "I don't care. Like, this is not justice. It's just revenge, and you gangsters and your justice," and runs off. And again, it shows where Mike is faulted, because Mike is still buying into that sort of need for revenge, and it's just gonna. Where does it end? It's going to end with his death, which it does. And so that was also a beautiful way to end Mike's storyline. But then we get back to the Kim and Saul stuff, which to me is the heart of this episode and why I love it so much. When they have to go to I guess you call it a wake or a eulogy, maybe I don't know if it's a funeral, but for Howard, that they're having an HHM, and they realize that Rich tells them HHM is disbanding, and it's going to a small building and changing its name, and it's really hitting them that what they did had affected everything. Like Saul just destroyed his brother's legacy. And they have to confront Howard's widow, who confronts them because Howard had told her before he died that they were running a scam on him. And Saul tries to play it off by being sort of, I think, kind of sincere, saying he was jealous of Howard and that Howard just misunderstood him and he didn't show Howard the respect he deserved, because he said he was jealous of Howard because he could tell Howard that his brother Chuck respected Howard, and that's something, his respect is something that Chuck never gave him, which is, I think, very sincere and true. But that's not, of course, what's won her over. What won her over is Kim stepping up and saying, "Yeah, there was one night where I caught him doing cocaine. We just looked at each other and we just pretended the whole thing never happened, and now I wish I spoke up." And it showed how masterful she was at lying, but again, how much that fucking hurt her to do that. And here's the thing I want to get into is, because of the scam, because they could say it's Lalo's fault, and this is what Saul tries to tell Kim. They're not the ones who killed Howard. Lalo did. But here's the thing. And it's not just that because they ran a scam, Howard was there, and if they never ran a scam, Howard wouldn't have been there to be killed. That's more circumstantial. It's more the fact that the scam was just supposed to be a bit of fun, and Howard was supposed to recover and get back on his feet. But because he was killed, that is now his legacy. And because of, that's Mike had to make the cover story that they had to stick to, otherwise they would fear for their lives. They had to stick to the cover story that Howard is a cocaine addict, and that's why he committed suicide. So they are stuck with something that was only supposed to have been a temporary bit of fun that has now become Howard's legacy. And that is the main reason why Kim is so guilty and feels so guilty. And the moment they get to the parking garage, and Saul could tell, like immediately, how difficult that was for her. And he says, "Oh, I know that was hard for you, but the hard part's over, we can move on." And then she gives him a really long, passionate kiss. And I remember first watching this episode, being able to recognize instantly that is a goodbye kiss. Now, Saul, of course, is in denial. He doesn't want to think that. So he is being purposely ignorant of it, but it's very obviously a goodbye kiss. And sure enough, we get the next couple of scenes where Kim quits being a lawyer, and then Saul freaks out and drives home in a tiffy and yelling about how she can't throw her life away. That's just her life's work. She's a lawyer. And he's like, "We're going to go work, burn the midnight oil, and we'll figure this out. We'll come up with a way to work around." And he goes in his bedroom and sees that she's packed. Everything is ready to leave. And then it becomes a totally different scene. Now, I talked before about this episode of The Leftovers called Good Day Melbourne, where I said that was the best breakup scene of all time. I think that was before I saw this episode. I would now say that the Leftovers scene is the second best breakup episode of all time. That one was a lot more sort of shocking and gritty and just they burned, set the whole hotel on fire. He's just sitting there smoking a cigarette while the sprinklers are going on. But this one is more emotionally powerful. For me, I might dare say that this is the best scene of the entire show. And because this is something that people have been theorizing and speculating on for almost the entire show's run, is what will happen to Kim. Why was Kim not in Breaking Bad times? And I think I guessed closely, my guess was approximately close enough, was that she would leave him, and her leaving him is what would make him depressed and lead him to become the sleazy lawyer that he will become, and which is essentially what happened. But I didn't know any of the specific details because other people were guessing stuff like that maybe she was still around, she was just off screen and we didn't see her, which I didn't think was the case, or maybe she was dead. That was a big theory. A lot of people think that she got killed, or some people think that she was in jail, and that's why Saul was so guilty. But my money was on she left him, and that's what made him depressed. So I was right out of those general ideas. But again, all that speculation and leading up to actually seeing this really powerful, and again, I think these are Oscar-worthy performances here. This is why I think Rhea Seehorn is probably even more so than Michael McKean for his performance in Chicanery, which again I fucking love that performance, but I think this is the best performance in the entire show. It's really powerful, and as I said, their weird relationship and how the give and take relationship they had and how it's falling apart was at the heart of the show, and seeing her point out why she needs to leave Jimmy was just absolutely heartbreaking, and it still brings me to tears. I think the one line that really gets to me the most, that I think is probably my favorite line or the best line of the show, is when Saul or Jimmy says to her, "I love you," and she says, "I love you too," but then she starts crying and she says, "But so what?" That really hits me. That is just that is so goddamn powerful, because she recognized, and she brings up the fact that Mike told her that Lala was still alive, and the reason why he didn't tell Jimmy about it was because she knew that Jimmy would call off the scam, and she didn't want to call off the scam because she was having too much fun. And again, this is a really interesting dynamic between the two, because she can tell that being around Saul was making her a worse person. Although she says something that I think she was wrong about. She says that apart they're fine, but together they're both worse people. Which actually I don't think is true about Saul or Jimmy. It is true about her. I think in a weird way, she made Jimmy a better person. And this was clear by the end of the episode, where we jumped to him being the sleazy lawyer. Because that's a direct response to her absence that caused him to go in this downward spiral and become a terrible, terrible person. But her being around Jimmy makes her a worse person, because she, as I said, had get off on and had on running these scams, and saw the worst part of Jimmy evoke the worst part of her. And Saul was just, as I said, he probably he wasn't even that big on running the scam on Howard. This was more Kim's idea, and he was just doing it to make her happy. And he couldn't resist that part of himself that wants to run a scam, but it wasn't something that he actively wanted to do the way Kim wanted to do it. And she realizes that it was because she was with him that they're worse, and their relationship was a very, very unhealthy one. So I absolutely agree with her decision to leave him, but god damn, it definitely made Saul a worse person. It definitely affected him in a very, very negative way, and that's why the ending where they jump cut to several years later, where he's, waking up after sleeping with a prostitute, and he's, Saul Goodman and talking on the phone as a very, very sleazy lawyer doing his sleazy thing, and we see him go to his office that has the Constitution on the wall, and how soulless he's become. That jumping to that actually brought me to tears. That was actually a powerful gut punch, even though it's something that we've seen coming from the very first episode. Like, we knew forever that this Jimmy McGill, who's kind of a good person, has a good heart, is going to end up becoming the soulless, sleazy lawyer who lives only for money. And there was definitely that side of him throughout the entire show, but it was definitely... there was a good side of him that was getting diminished. And seeing that gut punch from... and they're definitely making a direct correlation, as I said, with Kim leaving him to him becoming this terrible person. Not, as I said, it's not her fault. As I said, they were in an unhealthy relationship, and it was the best thing for her to get the hell out of it. But that was the result for Jimmy. And again, it's more of his fault because he let, and it kind of gets back to his brother, how he let the negative things his brother thought about him affect how he viewed himself, and how he let that himself believe that he was a no good, asshole, and that's all he would be good for because his brother believed it. And with Kim no longer being there to believe with him and pointing out that, and leaving him like that, he just spiraled down and became this terrible person. And again, it's not her fault, it's his fault, but still, that was the result of it. And fuck, it was just so powerful. And it's so powerful that the fact that they took something that we knew was coming and made it so powerful and such a gut punch and so heart-wrenching is such a monument to how brilliant this fucking show is. But yeah, so I think that should have been the finale. Maybe not of the show, because we do need the next 4 episodes, and I'm glad we have them, but maybe the mid-season finale, I think. Just my opinion. Alright, so let's get into these final 4 episodes where we do jump forward to the Gene storyline. Starting with the episode Nippy. I think, and this is another reason why I think that Fun and Games should have been the mid-season finale rather than Plan and Execution, is because I think going from that very, very powerful episode that kind of ends an era to this episode was rather disappointing. And I think that disappointment would have been softened if there had been several months in between. And again, it's not like having this intense cliffhanger, but still it would have been like, oh, I would have been waiting. I've been knowing that we're going into the Gene storyline. I don't know. For me, especially when I first saw this and even watching it again, going from that powerful episode to this, can't help but see it as a letdown. Not this is a terrible episode, because there's no terrible episodes in the show, but it's not that significant, especially after such, the run, not just the last episode, but the last 3 were like the best the whole show has got, and then we go from that to this, which is very actually typical of what Better Call. It seems like stuff I've seen Better Call Saul do tons of times before, where he's running a scam and they're doing the cinematography and showing the split screen, and oh no, is this heist, is it going to work? And it's we've seen this in Better Call Saul tons of times before. Now it built off of the Gene scenes that we got at the start of each season. And I remember, if I recall correctly, when I first saw this episode, when it first aired, there was no previously on, which I don't get. That doesn't make any sense. There should definitely be a previously on that shows the scenes with Gene. Again, if it's been years since you've seen those scenes because they aired in previous seasons, you might not get what the hell is going on. So I don't know. I consider that a knock on this. But basically he ran into the cab driver, and the cab driver recognized him, and he didn't want to admit it, but the cab driver showed up with his friend where he worked and made him admit that he was Saul, and then he was freaked out. He was going to call the vacuum guy to relocate, but then he thought about it. He's like, no, I'm going to handle this myself. And so he's resorting back, and this is him sort of getting back into his groove, because in the Gene era, he's sort of just become kind of lifeless and just living a plain life, and you see him long for the days that he was this great sleazy lawyer, or like Slipping Jimmy or whatever, and this is his chance to sort of run the one last con. To sort of get back into to get that feeling back. And so that I get, but again, they should have explained it with this previously on, because it directly builds off of that, because we jump straight into, it feels very jarring from going from that episode to this episode. That's just all I'll say. And then we see him running a scam on Jeff's mother, who's played by Carol Burnett, which, don't get me wrong, definitely a comedy legend and definitely deserves all the accolades she gets. I was just never into her stuff personally, so I'm not going goo-goo over this. And then Jeff himself was recast, and I'm sorry, I still, even though some people disagreed with me, I stand by my stance that I don't like this actor that they recast with. Now, apparently the actor they had before was unavailable and they couldn't get him, and that's stuff like that happens on TV shows, and they had to recast. I just think they should have done a better job, because for me, the original actor they had playing the cab driver had this feel to him, and that's credit to the actor, by the way, but he had this feel to him of someone who was inherently stupid. And the new actor they got, I wasn't feeling that. I wasn't feeling these, pardon the phrase, but dumb redneck vibes that I was getting from the previous guy. This guy, he had some more of like European vibes, and I don't know. I don't think it fit with the tone and the vibe they set up for this character. That's just me. You could think I'm wrong or whatever, and this actor's just I'm not saying he's a bad actor. I'm just saying he's not right for this role. Especially since someone else had previously played him, they should have made more of an effort to find someone who had more of that same sort of dumb vibes that this actor just simply did not have. Like this friend, who I believe they kept as the same actor, he had those dumb vibes, but it's just, I don't know. It didn't work as well. But yeah, the bulk of this episode with them like running around doing the tests and him making friends with the security guards and eating Cinnabons, that's fine, I guess. I just, for the most part, I don't know. This one just doesn't do it for me. And it's a letdown after the previous episodes too. And I just think they could have transitioned from the ending the Jimmy storyline going all the way to the Gene storyline. They could have handled this transition way better, in my humble opinion. And also, the end of the episode seems to imply that, alright, Saul or Gene had a chance of taste of being a con man, of being Slippy Jimmy, of being Saul Goodman one last time, but at the end he decided, well, this is over with, I'm going back to my normal life, which he doesn't do, which so it seems like the ending's kind of misleading in a way. But yeah, anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is Breaking Bad, which of course is a very ironic name because in Breaking Bad, the first episode that Saul Goodman appeared in was called Better Call Saul. So in Better Call Saul, the first episode that Walter White and Jesse Pinkman appear in is called Breaking Bad. It's called Symmetry. But more than that, the episode is about Saul breaking bad. So it fits more than... It's actually the theme, so it's almost like the perfect episode title. It's like the best episode title the show has that fits so beautifully. But anyway, because it's about, in the Gene storyline, it's about him. Well, first of all, it starts off with calling Francesca, and that was a really powerful scene. It was really great to see what she was up to, and she called him up on what everyone's up to. We found out that Huel wasn't stuck in a safe house for the rest of his life after all, like many people have been joking about, that he actually got off because of the DEA was sort of misleading or wrongfully misleading him, which is exactly what Hank and Gomez did, because they made him believe that Walt had killed Jesse, which was not in fact the case. So he got off because of that. So good for Huel. We find out. So it's good to find out about that. But the most important thing is she mentions Kim, and that Kim had called her after everything went down. So Jimmy has, or Gene or Saul, whatever you want to call him, has the guts to actually call Kim. Now in this episode we don't get that conversation. It's kind of muffled, and we see Saul's reaction to it, where he freaks out and like slams everything down and like cracks this phone booth. But we know it didn't go well. And then the following, and we know it directly leads to him going to Jeff, which he told Jeff, we're done if you see me walk the other way, but he breaks that and goes to him and is like, let's con some more. So it's obvious that this is a direct result of his conversation with Kim. And again, this is getting back to the theme of Saul letting Kim get to him. And it's a theme throughout the show, not just with Kim, also with Chuck and other people, is that when they think less of him, it makes him think less of himself. And there's like, well, fuck it, why should I be a good person? Why should I try to be normal? Let's do these scams because they're fun. And it really, and again, the Breaking Bad title is appropriate because it really shows how at first he's like scamming assholes, like this guy is being a dick to him and at the bar, and so when he scams him, you're like, well, good. That fucking guy deserved it. But by the time we get to the end of the episode, he's a really nice guy who's got cancer, loves his pets, and he still wants to scam him anyway. And even when his partner refuses to do it because he's like, no, I'm not gonna scam a guy with cancer. Saul's like, fine, you're out. And he's like so insistent. He's like risking going back there, which is very risky in many different ways. And of course we find out he does get caught, because it shows just how destructive he's letting other people's opinions of himself view himself, and how it leads him to a downward spiral. So that was amazing. Now this was intercut with flashbacks from the episode Better Call Saul. Again, more irony here, where Saul Goodman first meets Walter White and Jesse. And I think this is perfect. I think this is beautiful. I don't think it was just a fan service callback. Oh, here's the characters from that other show, because people have been wondering for 6 seasons if they'd ever show up on the show. But I think it's way more than that, because it's so relevant to the story. Like, it's a perfect coupling of the flashbacks, because we see, from the perspective that we didn't see in that episode, sort of the scenes in between, where Saul's putting it together that he's Heisenberg and he has this perfect product, and he sees, even as he describes it to Mike, he sees clay that he can mold. And Mike, being the very intelligent, insightful person that he is, immediately recognized, this guy's an amateur, he's going to bring you down with him, stay away from him. But of course, Saul, not being the sharpest knife in the tool shed, doesn't listen to Mike, which he should have, because he can see money in his eyes, he can see opportunity, and he goes to talk to Walter White, which of course is the scene we get in the show Breaking Bad, where he first approaches Walter White about going into business with each other. And I think it's a beautiful intercut, the way they intercut him walking up to the school Walter White works in, and a jump cut straight to him going back to the house of the guy with cancer. Because in both cases he's doing something totally stupid that is going to destroy him, because he's just too self-absorbed and too, up himself. So that was a powerful episode. I really enjoyed that. So next episode is Waterworks, which is another amazing episode, because we actually finally, for the first time, we get Kim in this storyline, in this time frame, seeing what she's up to and how she's living a very boring, ordinary life in Florida too. She's married to a guy who really, you can tell there's no love there. There's no chemistry there. And their life is really plain and boring. But that actually makes a lot of sense for Kim, because we saw she ran away from Albuquerque. She ran away from the law. She ran away from Saul because he was fun, and she was having a lot of fun, and that fun is what led to Howard's death and other people's lives being destroyed. So now she associates fun with horrible things happening. So it makes perfect sense that her reaction would be to live the most boring life possible. And maybe these scenes do drag on a little bit too long, because they kind of hammer the point down and they keep going. Yes, we get it. She lives a very boring life. But then we get the conversation that with Gene or Saul or whoever, Jimmy, we actually get the full conversation that was from the previous episode we didn't get to hear, where we find out what upsets Saul so much, and is that Kim tells him to turn himself in, and that freaks him out, and he starts yelling. He's like, "Well, you turn yourself in." And he tells her that, Gus Fring and Michael are all dead. Everyone's dead. There's no one around to, hurt them anymore. So why don't you turn yourself in? And he's just saying that sort of goad her, not expecting her to actually do it. But he actually gives her the information that, Mike and Gus and everyone involved, Lalo and everyone, is dead. And so now she realizes she's not in danger to confession. So the first thing she does is go to Albuquerque and confesses, which is amazing. And yeah, you see her go to the courthouse and make the confession and confess everything officially. But then she goes to Howard's widow and shows her the affidavit that she made. And because purposely, and she didn't have to, and because she wants Howard's widow to know, and Howard's widow was like, "Well, what's going to happen to you? You're going to go to prison." And she says, "No, they have no physical evidence, so they're probably not going to do anything." And she's like, "Well, I could take it to civil court and sue your pants off and sue you in perpetuity." And she's like, "Yeah, you could." So she knows that she could destroy her life, and she doesn't care. She's like, if that's what you want to do, that's what I deserve. And then again, Oscar-winning performance. Got another extremely powerful scene when Kim is taking the transport bus to the airport, and she just breaks down in tears and starts crying. God damn. God damn, that scene was just so powerful. And then when we see that she gets back to Florida, she's no longer happy with her boring life. She realizes that she wants to do good again, and so she's, signs up to volunteer at a law firm there, helping those who can't afford doing the kind of work that she was doing. She's kind of woken up from her slumber. That confessing kind of freed her soul, and she might be sued into oblivion, but she's willing to deal with that. And that is just so goddamn powerful. But then, of course, on the Saul end of things, the Gene end of things, we get the very funny scene where the cop car pulls up to the cab that's waiting outside while Saul's inside the house robbing it, and they're just sitting there and they're talking. I love how you see it. I just love the scene, how you see it from the cop's perspective. They're just talking about the food and they don't even give a shit. Well, the cab, Jeff, is like freaking the fuck out, saying, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And then he goes to drive off, and the first thing he does is just crash straight into a parked car. Oh my god, that was so hilarious. Especially, and the cops just look at each other like, oh god, and then they gotta put their lights on. Oh my god, that was absolutely hilarious. And this, we found that Saul was dumb for going back to that guy's house, and that he didn't get caught there. He did get away, but of course, that leads to Jeff getting caught. And Jeff's mother is already getting very suspicious of him. And then when he calls and knows exactly the law in Albuquerque, she gets extremely suspicious and looks him up on the internet and looks up con man in Albuquerque and sees his name and finds out who he is. And he goes to confront her, and this is where it gets really dark. He starts to really go down a dark path where he actually threatens her life. Like, he grabs her and it's like threatens to kill her, but I don't think he would actually do it. He was just trying to scare her, which doesn't work because she still calls the Lifeline people and tells them to get him, and then the gig is up. He's now completely found out because he fucked up badly, which was quite powerful. And that leads us to the big series finale, Saul Gone. This is, I think, one of the best finales of all time. And this, again, if I did the top 10 of favorite series finales of all time, this would easily be in my top 5. It's just so powerful. So it starts off with him running from the cops, going to the dumpster. The cops find him. He gets arrested, and he calls. God, what's that guy's name? I love that guy so much. Bill Oakley. He was one of my favorite characters. I always thought that he was hilarious. And he calls him to be his defense attorney, and then he comes up with this scheme to where he pretends that he's just another victim, and that Walter White coerced him into it, and that he was afraid of his life. And I like the prosecutor was just like, oh, you really think a jury's going to buy that? And his response is, one. All I need is one. God damn. And he's doing that to negotiate for a much lighter sentence. And at first they were talking about giving him like 160 years on top of a life sentence. And he managed to talk that down to 7 years in a sort of resort type prison where the rich people go. And so that was, in fact, super impressive. And he was getting his old Saul Goodman juices, his Slipping Jimmy juices going. But it comes to an end. It comes to a very sharp, abrupt end when he tries to sell the Howard Hamlin thing, and he learns that Kim did confess immediately. And apparently this was life-changing for him. And he started to look at things in a different direction. And again, this gets back to Kim making him a better person, which realizing that there could be a good person. And at this stage, of course, Kim has shed her dark side, as you will, and has become completely a better person. And when he learns about that, that makes him realize that he should do the same. And so you get the scene where they go. He's already made the deal. He just goes to the judge to finalize the deal. And instead of telling the same story that would get him off, he confesses to everything. And I love Bill Oakley's response. Can I remove myself from this case? It was absolutely hilarious. Oh, but first of all, he lies and tells them that he's going to reveal something about Kim that could affect her. Because, mind you, part of why Kim wasn't going to be arrested or no consequences for her part in the Howard Hamlin thing is because there was no other witnesses. But with Saul being a witness, then she could be in trouble. And so he implies that he is going to give her trouble. But that was just a pretense to get her to fly out to be at the trial because he wanted her to be there to see his confession. Not only does he confess to everything he did with Walter White and all the terrible things he did, and he flat out says Walter White probably would have been arrested or killed very soon after if it wasn't for me. I went in and helped him and made him the worst gangster that he became, and he fessed up to that. But more than that, he acknowledged his part in scamming his brother. And the judge is like, well, I don't really care about that. That's not really relevant here. He's like, well, it's relevant to me. And he wanted Kim to know that because actually Kim did not know that. Kim never knew that Saul went to the insurance, and that's why they dropped Chuck and basically took away being a lawyer for him, which is what directly led to his suicide. And so he'd been completely blanking that from his mind and erased that from his mind because he didn't want to face the consequences. But now finally he has, after this realization, after living in fear, living this dull, boring, bland life as Gene, he realizes and then trying to live the flashy life of, Saul Goodman again and having it only bite him in the ass again. Kim showed him the way, and he finally realized that neither of that is good for him, that he needs to face what he's done and finally be honest with himself. And I think he was hiding from this whole time. But he was finally now, after hitting rock bottom and seeing Kim willing to risk her whole life to do what's right, led him to do what's right. And even the powerful moment where he says the name's McGill, Jimmy McGill. That's and then to top it all off, you get to see him once they get to prison. Kim visits him in prison pretending to be his lawyer, and they just silently share a cigarette like they did in the very first episode. Such beautiful symmetry. And also it's just a way to show that her subtle way of showing how much she appreciates what he did and how much she respects him for it. And now he's going to be spending 180 years of the rest of his life in prison, never going to see daylight again, and he's gone to a rough prison, not the resort he was hoping to go to. But he's okay with that because he's admitted who he truly is. and how much she respects him for that. And so they just share the cigarette. It's perfect way to end the show. Yeah, just absolutely amazing. And also I talked about the symmetry with the whole Breaking Badiverse, because you had, if you look at the three main figures in Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, which is Walter White, Jesse Pinkman, and Saul Goodman. I guess you could throw anyone else. Those are the main three. And when you think of a criminal who, is living this high life of crime, there's usually one of three outcomes, especially in a show or a movie. One of three outcomes that's going to happen to, someone who's living this high life as a criminal, this outlaw life. Either they're going to die, or they're going to go to prison, or they're going to get away with it. And so Breaking Bad, we saw the first option with Walter White. He died, which makes sense for him because he always had cancer and his time on this earth was always short anyway, so that was the perfect way to end his story. Jesse Pinkman, we saw in the movie El Camino, which, by the way, any of these idiots who tell you, was this movie really necessary? Get the fuck out of here with that. Yeah, the movie was absolutely 1,000% necessary because it shows what happened to Jesse Pinkman, and he gets the other option. He gets away with it, and if anyone deserved to get away with it, it's Jesse, because he was led astray and was dealt a raw deal, and to see him come on top and get to live his life over and be happy was a beautiful, perfect ending for him. But that ending wouldn't make sense for Saul Goodman, who is a despicable lawyer. He needs to realize he has become despicable and turn his life around. So for his storyline, we get the third option, not death, not getting away with it, but prison. And I think that makes perfect sense for Saul. So God, yeah, it was not only was it the perfect way to end Better Call Saul, it's the perfect way to end this whole franchise. Which, if Vince Gilligan can be, if he's being honest, we won't see any more entries. And honestly, I don't think we need to. I think this universe has been good and covered with these two shows and the movie. So yeah, I think we're good. And I think this episode is good. Perfect ending for an amazing show. So, now getting into my favorite and least favorite episodes of the season. Again, it's hard because so many episodes were amazing. Least favorite, I only got one episode to talk about, which is, again, not a terrible episode, but my clear least favorite episode of the season, and that's Nippy. As I said, not a terrible episode, but it's definitely a weird transition from the powerful episode that came previous to it, and it's kind of just doing things we've seen before, the whole scam with the security guard and making a heist thing. Like, Better Call Saul has done this dozens of times before, and I think there's a better way they could have went from the Jim and McGill storyline to the Gene storyline. I think the transition didn't quite work for me. But getting into the good episodes, well, I could name every other episode in this season. So usually I name my 8, 9, and 10 episodes, but then, as I said, I would name every episode, so I'll just stick with my 9 and 10 episodes. For my 9 rated episodes, we got Carrot and Stick and Breaking Bad, which, again, 2 amazing episodes, but 10 rated episodes. We have Rockin' Hard Plays. We got Plan and Execution, Point and Shoot, Waterworks, Saul Gone. All amazing, top-notch, excellent episodes. But for my favorite episode of the season, I am going to have to say Fun and Games. Yeah, this one hit me the hardest, and it's kind of is an epilogue to, Plan and Execution and Point and Shoot. but it ends this era, and it does it in spectacular fashion. And as I said, the Kim and Jimmy dynamic is, to me, the heart of the show. And this, to see that come to a clashing end here with this, as I said, which I think is the best breakup scene in ever in any movie or show. Yeah, it was spectacular. So that is going to be my pick for best episode of season 6. Now, as for my rating for season 6 of Better Call Saul out of 10, gonna have to give it a 10. Definitely give it a 10. As I said, the best. This is one of my favorite seasons of all time. I think this is definitely the best season of the show. It was the best way to end the show. It had just so many amazing episodes. Definitely a 10. No question. So that is it for my episode by episode review of season 6 of Better Call Saul. I shall return in a month to do my top 25 favorite episodes of Better Call Saul. Finally, something I've been putting off for over a year because I had to wait for season 6 to do that. So that will be next month, and that will be the end of my coverage of Better Call Saul. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for checking this out. Be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other videos and other shows like Star Trek Lower Decks, Ahsoka, and covering Star Trek, many Star Trek videos and many videos and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.